What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Rough Drafts, where I go deep each week on specific topics in the current limited format. My name is Sam Pratt. This week we're going to be talking about Black Mage's Rod. I'll go ahead and start just by reading the card text. Black Mage's Rod is a 2-mana common in black. It costs 1 and a black. It is an equipment with job select, so it makes the 1/1 and attaches to it. And the equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent and is a wizard in addition to its other types, and has equip 3. So I'm going to start the discussion on Black Mage's Rod with a little bit of story time. So first week of the format, I was doing really well with a blue-green deck that I was very happy with, and I ran into Andrew Cuneo on ladder, who goes by Gainsay. And our match starts, he plays a Black Mage's Rod, plays like a combat tutorial, trades it off, eventually plays another Black Mage's Rod, and he's ended up dumping a lot of mana into re-equipping the Rod to his creatures. And that play pattern kind of surprised me at the time. I was pretty relieved to see him spend his mana in the mid-game turns equipping his Black Mage's Rod to his creatures rather than playing more spells. And then he kind of just burned me out. Like, he had a couple timely removal spells. He played a bunch of cantrips like Dreams of Laguna, which is the kind of think twice variant, like 2 mana, surveil 1, draw a card, and then has flashback for 4. So I was really impressed with that deck of his. I will link that specific game in the show notes if you want to see the replay. And that was the very first time that I saw kind of the power of Black Mage's Rod. In this really scrappy blue-black deck that was mostly playing, I only saw commons and uncommons, mostly commons. So that really put something in my brain of there's something really synergistic that you can do with this card. Part 2 of the story of my Black Mage's Rod discovery journey. I was in Vegas this weekend at MagicCon, and I was playing in the Lords of Limited community drafts that they set up on Friday. So it was basically just show up to a certain area, bring your own packs. We're just going to draft all day. It was great. I played against someone named Will, who's a very good player. He had a very good blue-black deck. It was really scrappy, had a lot of commons and uncommons, some Black Mage's Rods, some Undercity Dire Rats, which is the 2-drop in black that dies into a treasure. He was running a couple Vincent's Limit Break, which is the 2-mana instant in black that resets a creature's power and toughness to different scales based on how much mana you spend, and then when it dies, you return it to the battlefield. And he also had he had the Commander Ninjutsu card off the bonus sheet, Yuriko. So there was this game of should I block his rat? Should I not? It was a really fun match. I ended up clutching the match out because my deck was busted. I had Genova and Nibelheim Flame in a really stellar green-red beatdown deck. But I walked away from that match feeling really impressed with what that scrappy blue-black kind of tempo deck could do. And it really reminded me of the game I played against Cuneo, where he burned me out basically from 9 in the span of a couple of turns, basically 1 turn. And then I checked in on my friend Justin, who I went to the con with a couple of hours later, and he was actually finishing up his match against that same opponent that I had in the community draft, Will, a couple hours ago, and he was playing almost the exact same deck, like a very scrappy, low to the ground, blue-black, almost like tempo deck, with Vincent's Limit Break, Black Mage's Rod. So once I saw that, I was like, okay, this is definitely a thing. Blue-black, either tempo or proactive mid-range, really relying on commons, spell payoffs, etc. And I drafted basically a version of that deck on Sunday at the con, which I will link the image. The deck ran like an absolute dream. I had, I think, 3 Sahagins, 2 Black Mage's Rods. I had 4 of the 2-mana cantrips. So I'm talking Resentful Revelation, which is a card I'll talk about later, and Dreams of Laguna. I also had the Bolus's Citadel, which was really fun. So there's definitely something here with this scrappy blue-black proactive mid-range tempo deck. I'm going to go into detail on the specific decks that want Black Mage's Rod later on in the episode. But I wanted to give a little background on my experience with the card, playing against it and with it first. And before I get into specifics, I want to talk about a concept, a conversation I had that I think is going to lead to some interesting points of view in terms of talking about the black 2-drops in general. So another Vegas thing, I was at the Lords of Limited live show on Friday in Vegas, and it's very good. You should go watch it. They talked about Matt Nass's Pro Tour draft on Friday morning, but one of the big things they did was they contacted a bunch of the Pro Tour testing teams and asked for their opinions on the format. And just quick aside, one of the very cool things was that the testing teams all had very different opinions on the colors. Like there was some overlap, but one of the teams had white in first, one of the teams had white in last. Very interesting. Their contact for the team Sanctum of All was Ryan Condon. And one of the points that Ryan mentioned was that they said it was very important in understanding the format to understand the nuance between Black Mage's Rod, Hectize, and Undercity Dire Rat. Just quickly, Hectize is the 2-mana common in black. It's a 1/1 when it enters, opponent discards a card. Undercity Dire Rat is the 2-mana 2/2 in black. When it dies, you make a treasure. So I really like that point. By this point, I was pretty sure I was going to talk about Black Mage's Rod on the episode this week. So when I got back home, I reached out to Ryan. I'm going to paraphrase their response, but what they have to say is really the kind of core of what I want to get to in this episode. Kind of exploring the difference between these 3 2-drops and what that means for building your black decks in this format, and highlighting exactly where Black Mage's Rod will shine. So Ryan had an interesting point that this format in particular is more about individual colors than color pairs. And in this format, black in particular is you either care about spell slinging, so like blue-black or black-red, or you care about like a sacrifice grindy aspect. Those are kind of the 2 black decks that you're going to encounter. That fits very nicely into blue-black and black-red versus white-black and black-green. I do think there's a little overlap. We'll talk about that later. Looking at all 3 of those 2-drops in particular, so Rod, Hectize, and Dire Rat, Rod is the worst in combat. So you make a 2/1, but you don't really want to trade the 2/1 off because it has the static ability, and Black Mage's Rod has a pretty steep equip cost. So the creature you're creating, it will get in if it's unblocked. You're ideally not trading it off. It's more like you're creating this enchantment that's going to deal passive damage. So you want to care about the damage output on Rod. So you want to be some sort of like proactive mid-range deck, because a control deck, the chip damage is just not going to add up to be enough to close the game. On the other hand, Hectize and Dire Rat are more in the category of black decks that are grindy, like attrition decks. So Ryan mentioned these types of decks are decks where you're trying to find bombs or maybe just powerful cards and play them. So less synergy decks, more caring about power. The interesting thing, though, is that each of Hectize and Dire Rat vote for a different type of game. So I'm going to do my best to explain this concept. Hectize votes for a small game. So when you play a Burglar Rat type of card, like a creature that makes your opponent discard a card, they're down a resource, which makes cards that work better when your opponent is down a resource better. So I'm talking about a card like Jekt is the example that they gave, which is the 4-mana 4/3 in Menace in black that when it deals combat damage to a player, it flips into this insane saga and they basically lose the game. So you can see how a card that puts them down a resource makes a creature with Menace a lot better. On the other hand, Dire Rat votes for a big game, which is a game where you want a lot of resources. And Dire Rat votes for a big game because it creates a treasure, which is going to ramp you to things like Sin or Arden. Sin is the Sultai, like 7/7 Leviathan that reanimates things out of your graveyard. Arden is the 8-mana 4/4 in black that reanimates things out of any graveyard. If you don't know this big game, small game terminology, there's a really, really good old Sam Black article from, I believe it's from Kaldheim Limited, where Sam goes in detail on this concept of big game, small game, which I believe he coined himself. Basically looks at this concept through the lens of comparing Elvish Visionary, which is a 2-mana 1/1 that draws a card, and Burglar Rat. which is a 2-mana 1/1 that your opponent discards a card, to kind of exemplify this binary between big game and small game. So I would highly recommend checking that out if you're at all interested in like Magic Theory or anything like that. It's a really good concept. So there's kind of three things going on there. There's Black Mage's Rod is like your synergy payoff. It's like a proactive mid-range card. Heck Dies is when you're more of a grindy deck, but you want a small game. Dire Rat is your grindy deck and you want a big game. There's a lot of overlap between these three commons. You're not going to exclusively pick out one to play. You're often going to be most interested in two, depending on your deck. I'll go into the detail on that a little bit later. The main point is it's the difference between filling out your deck with commons that support a synergy theme versus commons that support a power theme. So the synergy theme would be like Black Mage's Rod. If you're a deck that's this proactive synergy deck, like these scrappy blue-black decks or most black-red decks, where you're trying to cast a lot of non-creature spells, churn through your deck, deal your opponent a lot of damage, get chip damage in, versus commons that just kind of support digging to your more powerful cards. That would be like Bombs or Signposts, something like Green-Black, where Green-Black's plan is often mill a lot, find your bombs, recur them. Maybe you're just like milling to support Cloud of Darkness, which is a type of synergy, but it's more about the power in your deck than your deck being greater than the sum of its parts. So I'm going to leave this concept there. Ryan was very gracious to give me a lot to talk about. And I think this concept of the binary between commons that are pushing towards synergy and commons that are just kind of like these functional things that support this macro plan to support your more powerful cards has a lot in there to think about, and it's really interesting. So if you're interested in hearing more from Ryan, they have a Patreon where they post really good articles. You can find them on Blue Sky at r-condon.bsky.social. And I would really recommend going to check them out. So after hearing back from them, I did some data digging of my own, and I looked at this trio of black 2-drops in each color pair. And I thought it would be interesting just to go through all 4 of the black color pairs and look at how all 3 perform alongside each other, because I did find some interesting information. I'm just sorting per color pair by game in hand win rate. Black-green, this is going to be very quick when it comes to Black Mage's Rod. Heck Dies is number 1, followed by Dire Rat. And then Black Mage's Rod is in the gutter. So it should be pretty obvious. Black-green is not at all about non-creature spells. You should not be putting Black Mage's Rod in almost any black-green deck. The best home for Black Mage's Rod is definitely black-red. So if you look at the black-red stats, it is very clearly Black Mage's Rod, then Heck Dies, then Dire Rat. And this is as expected. Black Mage's Rod is like one of the key commons for this black-red Wizards deck. It's like the proactive, chip damage, kind of grindy, black-red, I'm going to cast a lot of spells, churn through my deck and kill you type of deck. I would have expected Black Mage's Rod to be the best of the 3 commons in blue-black after my experience playing against and with this kind of scrappy blue-black tempo mid-range deck. But it's actually Heck Dies number 1, and then Black Mage's Rod, and then Dire Rat, which is a bit surprising. But I think this just shows that there are multiple ways to build blue-black. I think Heck Dies is likely better in the type of blue-black deck that would be interested in holding up mana for counterspells, the more blue-based black decks that want to play at instant speed. Because I think one of the key aspects of Black Mage's Rod is the ability to re-equip it at sorcery speed and maybe chip in the air with a Dragoon's Wyvern with it, while also dealing your opponent chip damage from your spells. And a deck that wants to hold up counter magic is not really going to be interested in spending mana at sorcery speed to re-equip the Rod. After thinking about it, I do think it makes sense, but I do think there are multiple ways to build blue-black. And in this scrappy, tempo-ish deck, I don't think you're super interested in Syncopate. You'll definitely play like Swallowed by Leviathan, and I could see playing Syncopate in these decks, but I think the main plan of those decks is like playing Resentful Revelation and Dreams of Laguna. And then I took a look at white-black, which is one of the decks that I expected it to underperform, and all three of the 2-drops are actually very close in win rate, and Black Mage's Rod is very slightly ahead of the other two, which was really surprising to me. But thinking about what white-black is doing, this is two different rectangles that you can sacrifice maybe to your Phantom Train or to your Veins Treachery. White-black is a very kind of chippy, proactive deck. You get a lot of these triggers off casting other job select equipment, and you might be playing something like Adelbert Steiner, which is the 2-mana 2/1 lifelink, gets +1/+1 for each equipment you control. Like you might have like these sideways equipment payoffs in your white-black deck, or artifact payoffs in general. I thought that was pretty interesting, and I do think that Rod, Rat, and Hectize all being very close together in win rate in white-black makes kind of a lot of sense, because I think there are multiple ways to build white-black. If you're more caring about sacrifice, you probably are more interested in Dire Rat and Black Mage's Rod because they create two rectangles. If you're like a white-black control removal pile with some bombs, you would be more interested in Hectize than Black Mage's Rod by a lot. So this little data deep dive kind of revealed to me that, especially for blue-black and white-black, I think there are many different ways to build them. And I think that really comes from, are you like white-black, are you a base white deck with black cards, or are you a base black deck with white cards? So zeroing in more on Black Mage's Rod than Hectize and Dire Rat, what type of deck does want Black Mage's Rod? So like I mentioned earlier, I don't think this is a good card for a control deck. So if you're a blue-black control deck, I think you're going to be more base blue than you are base blue-black. I think you're going to be more interested in something like Sahagin in the 2-drop slot as something that can deter attacks and take over the game pretty quickly in the late game. I don't think the chip damage adds up quickly enough. I think for Black Mage's Rod, you're going to be more interested in being a mid-range, proactive mid-range, or even like a tempo deck where the chip damage really turns the screws in the late game from the Rod. Like your opponent goes from needing to deal with a creature that the Rod comes attached to actually being able to deal with the Rod, or turning the corner and killing you before you can kind of turn the screws and kill them. This is very similar to the concept of inevitability that I talked about last week, the kind of pressing your advantage. Once you have Black Mage's Rod going, once you've dealt them a decent amount of damage in the early turns and they've kind of stabilized, you have the inevitability to keep casting your cantrips, which I think the cantrips with Black Mage's Rod are extremely important. So the two cards I'm talking about here are Dreams of Laguna and Resentful Revelation. And I want to zero in on Resentful Revelation because this card is really, really good. It is the 2-mana sorcery in black. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one in your hand, rest in the graveyard, and it's got flashback for 7 mana. This card's a huge overperformer. I did not expect it to be very good. It does not look very good. It's basically strategic planning with a really expensive flashback mode, and strategic planning was not a very impressive card the times we've seen it. So I was very surprised that the flashback on this spell bumps it up so much, but it just really works for every black deck. Putting cards into your graveyard is very relevant for black, green, and blue, black. Finding your good cards is good for your decks with a lot of power in them. Churning through your library is good for these blue, black, and black, red decks. I think this card is very, very important. If you look at the data, it's one of the best black commons. I think you should start picking it like it's one of the best black commons. Just a very good card. And I think it works with Black Mage's Rod perfectly, like churning through your deck, finding more non-creature spells to cast. Very similar to Sahagin a couple episodes ago, where you just want to keep casting more and more non-creature spells. I've talked so much about the Grixis space, blue, red, and black cards the last couple of episodes. Those are my favorite colors to draft in this format by a lot. So I think Black Mage's Rod, most importantly, it's a synergy piece. It's not a generically good card. Like 2 mana, 2/1 body is not very good. The equip rate is not very good. 3 mana for +1/+0, not very good. But the synergy it has with the other black spells, like Cornered by Black Mages, the red and blue instants and sorceries, very, very good synergy piece there. So you need to treat this as a synergy piece. Like I said before, black-red is the natural home for this. In blue-black, you want to be that kind of proactive mid-range deck, the low-to-the-ground Cantropy, tempo deck with like Dragoon's Wyverns, Dreams of Laguna, Resentful Revelations. In white-black, you want to care about the 2 rectangles to sack. You want to be a more proactive deck that's looking to deal chip damage. Maybe you have Phantom Trains and you want 2 rectangles to sack to that. Phantom Train is a card that gets a lot better if you've already been pressuring your opponent's life total because it represents a real clock at that point. And, in white-black, it also has the equipment synergies. So it's a very versatile card. You need to know when to use it. I hope I've outlined when to use it. And I hope the discussion about looking at the 3 different black 2-drops was helpful in kind of envisioning what your deck actually cares about, like what your deck is doing, your deck's plan, is it synergy versus power. I'm going to wrap it up there. A little bit of a shorter episode this week. I'm still very tired from my trip to Vegas this weekend. I had a blast saying hi to people there. Huge thanks to Ryan Condon for talking through those concepts that they sent to Lords Unlimited. Next week, I'm going to try very hard to talk about a white or green card. Like I said, I came away from this weekend of drafts really wanting to be in the Grixis space draft after draft. I just really prefer the decks that come out of that space more than green and white. But I've talked about blue, red, and black cards so far, so I'll try to think of something in white and green to talk about next week. I do have a lot of experience drafting those colors, so it shouldn't be hard. If you do have something that you think would be good to talk about on this show, you can let me know on Blue Sky at sampratt.bsky.social. You can message me on Discord at samp6, and I stream occasionally on Twitch at samp_mtg. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.